Come into this video with an open mind. We're about to show you a series of discoveries that have baffled the finest scientific minds in the world. In fact, some of the discoveries are so unique and bizarre that scientists would prefer to say that they never existed at all. Are they hoaxes? Are they the product of ancient or alien technologies beyond our comprehension? Watch the video and make your own mind up. At the beginning of April 2017, archaeologists made a very strange discovery in the Peace River Valley region of Alaska, not far from the already well-established archaeological site known as Site C near Bear Flat. The whole area was in the process of being surveyed ahead of a planned reservoir logging development. Allegedly, the discovery appears to be the wreckage of a vessel of some kind. The fragments of metal found at the site have been tested and found to be 20,000 years old, far too old to have originated on Earth. We already know that Peace River has been a highway for the area's indigenous population for several centuries. Might it also have been a highway for extraterrestrial visitors? There might be another angle to this story, though. Some of the archaeologists responsible for the discovery are opposed to the planned redevelopment of the area. So there's a suspicion that the out-of-this-world discoveries were planted in an attempt to hold up the project. There's also the small fact that the discovery was announced on April 1st, which is April Fool's Day in the United States of America. Maybe mainstream scientists were wise to give this story a wide berth. Let's see if this next story of chunks of metal falling from the sky is any more plausible. It happened in a rural Cambodian village in October 2018, and this time, the mainstream media picked up on the story and ran with it. According to the residents of the village, which is in Cambodia's Pria Vihear province, the first piece of metal hit the ground with a loud bang during the early hours of Thursday, October 25th. These pictures were taken at the time of the incident and show one large shard of metal in a field, surrounded by smaller pieces scattered across the surrounding area. 17 pieces fell to earth in total, some of which landed on houses, but fortunately, nobody was hurt. The presence of rubber attached to some of the metal fragments suggested that this story has a down-to-earth origin. These are probably pieces of space junk that have fallen back to the ground after the launch of a satellite or rocket. There's still a mystery here, though, as none of the pieces have any identifying marks on them. If this is debris from somebody's space program, they're keeping quiet about it. The United Kingdom has had its own fair share of UFO and flying saucer stories over the years. In 1957, there were mainstream newspaper reports of a tiny flying saucer being found on Silpho Moor, close to Scarborough in Yorkshire, England. Although the stories disappeared from the press almost as soon as they were published. Scientists of the time claimed that testing had shown the object to have a terrestrial origin, but it was taken away anyway and remained hidden until February 2018, when a few pieces of it turned up in the archives of the Victoria and Albert Museum. The initial reports of the object's discovery described it as 18 inches in diameter and covered with thin sheets of copper, upon which unintelligible hieroglyphics were carved. What was found in the museum represents only a fraction of the artifact. The whereabouts of the rest of it remain unknown. There is a plausible explanation for what's happened here, though. The alleged UFO was found only 3 weeks after the launch of Russia's first Sputnik satellite, and the supposed hieroglyphics on its surface could easily have been Russian. Without the rest of the pieces, though, it's hard to say for sure. While the British UFO discovery may or may not be Russian, there's no doubting the Russian origin of this next find. It's a collection of space debris that landed in the garden of a Chinese farmer in the Heilongjiang province in May 2014. There were plenty of photographs where the debris burned through the sky and fell to Earth, and it didn't take long to work out where they'd come from. On that same day, A Russian rocket that was supposed to carry a communications satellite into orbit fell out of the sky before it could complete its mission. The Proton rocket had suffered an engine control failure a mere 9 minutes after it took off from Russia's Baikonur Space Center in Kazakhstan, and the problem couldn't be corrected in time to save it. Luckily, the rocket was unmanned. The bits that landed in the farmer's garden have been confirmed to be parts of both the rocket and the $205 million Express AM-4P satellite it was carrying. It was an expensive and somewhat embarrassing loss for the Russians and a near miss for the Chinese, because if it had landed on a densely populated area, the outcome could have been tragic. If you've never heard the term fatberg before, you can consider yourself lucky. But we're about to change that. In September 2017, this enormous, disgusting fatberg was found in the sewers beneath London, England. It almost looks like a vast, gelatinous life form, and that would be preferable to what it really is. The sewers under the city's Chinatown district were built 170 years ago, and they've accumulated a lot of human detritus since then. Over time, that detritus has congealed and fused together to make repulsive objects like this blob, which weighs 26 tons. A short and unpleasant list of what the blob is made of includes cooking oil, fat, wet wipes, nappies, and just about every form of household waste you can imagine. Some unfortunate employees of the Thames Water Company were given high-powered hoses to spray at the fatberg in the hope that it can be broken up and then sucked out into disposal tankers. The good news is that the raw material could produce up to 10,000 liters of biodiesel, but we're glad someone else has to worry about the practicalities of that job. Is the Voynich manuscript a beautifully elaborate practical joke or a message for humanity written in a code that nobody can translate? Academics have been arguing over that question ever since the manuscript was found in Rome in 1912, and they've yet to reach a conclusion. While there might be plenty of people who believe it's a forgery or a joke, Yale University in the USA is sufficiently convinced of its authenticity to keep it in the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. The story of the manuscript prior to its 1912 discovery is unknown, but radiocarbon dating of the pages it's written on suggests it has a 15th century origin. The book runs to 240 pages and is full of mysterious illustrations. The illustrations would probably make sense to anybody who could read the script, but unfortunately nobody can. The unknown author of the Voynich manuscript even provided a cipher for the code, but either the cipher doesn't work, or the academics who've studied it don't understand it properly. The topics covered within the text are wide and varied. On one page you might see a detailed picture of a flower, but on the next there might be a drawing of a dress or a pair of shoes. This might be nothing but a 15th century home and fashion guide. But then, what would be the point of encoding it? There's a wall in Jordan that ought to be every bit as famous as the Great Wall of China, and yet hardly anybody knows it exists at all. Perhaps that's because it's such a difficult thing to explain, and so historians prefer not to think about it. The enormous construction is known as the Khat Shabib Wall and runs through the Jordanian desert for more than 90 miles. What makes it especially odd is the fact that it has no clear purpose. There's never been a settlement anywhere near here. There isn't even any archaeological evidence that suggests people settled near it even temporarily. That means there's nothing to defend or protect. It's almost like someone built a huge wall for no reason whatsoever. The wall went totally unnoticeable until a British diplomat flew over it in a plane in 1948 and asked his local guide to tell him about it. That chance discovery prompted an archaeological dig at several sites along the length of the wall, but nothing that would tell us anything about it has ever been found. We don't even know how old it is. When the mummified remains of a woman were found in Mongolia's Altai Mountains in 2017, there were brief fears that she might have passed away recently. Those fears were based on the boots she was wearing. If you don't look at them too closely, they could pass for a brand new pair of Adidas snow boots. Adidas didn't manufacture this footwear for her though. She passed away somewhere around 1,100 years ago. No footwear that looks anything like this has ever been found in Mongolia before, so the current theory is that she was a talented seamstress and probably made them herself. She chose the now iconic 3-stripe design because she thought it looked good. If only she'd known how far ahead of her time she was. Aside from the eye-catching shoes, she also had a comb, a mirror, a cute handbag, and 4 different changes of clothes with her when she passed away. That implies she was a dedicated follower of fashion. But inside the cute handbag, experts found goat bones, the entire broken spine of a sheep, and a smaller bag containing an even smaller cup. The latter discoveries suggest she may have been a witch, albeit an extremely fashionable one. In 2002, 2 human skeletons were found beneath the ruins of an 11th century building in Clod Hallan, a tiny village on Scotland's South Uist Island. Although they appeared to be comparatively normal skeletons when first examined, they quickly began to create problems. The first issue was that the skeletons are around 3,000 years old, but were buried no more than 2,400 years ago. That was eventually explained by the theory that the bodies were preserved in a peat bog for hundreds of years and then reburied by the people who found them. Then a second and more complicated problem reared its head. The bones didn't go together. The jaw of the female didn't quite fit the skull, and the arms weren't the same length. Confused by their observations, scientists performed DNA tests on the bones and made an astonishing discovery. The 2 skeletons, now known as the Clod Hallan bog bodies, were made from the bones of 6 different people. None of those 6 people were related to each other, and some of the pieces of the male skeleton are hundreds of years older than the skull. There must be a reason why the ancient Scots built Frankenstein skeletons, but it's lost on us. In the overwhelming majority of cases, coffins are buried beneath the ground. On the rare occasions that doesn't happen, they're generally placed in tombs or mausoleums. That's not the case in Sagada in the Philippines, though. Here, they're nailed to or suspended from the sides of cliffs and caves. To make this unique burial ritual even stranger, it's expected that a sick or elderly Sagadan will make their own coffin from hollowed logs in readiness for their death, although it's permissible for family to assist if they're too ill or frail. This practice has been happening in Sagada for over 2,000 years and is believed to stem from the ancient idea that placing the remains of the deceased in a high place will help their spirit rise to the heavens. Although some of the coffins you'll see here today are well over a century old, they all inevitably rot eventually and plummet back to the ground. It's not a very pleasant thought, and it also makes falling corpses an occupational hazard when you're attending a funeral. It's easy to say you don't believe in hell until you see the West Komakuna skylight in Hawaii. With the glowing fiery furnace burning inside its deep pit and the twisted faces of human souls staring back at you from its blackened sides, how could this be anything but the portal to Hades itself? While it might look like the most impressive and detailed Gothic sculpture you've ever seen, this landmark was shaped by nature rather than nurture. We see faces in the rock because of a phenomenon known as pareidolia. In reality, this is nothing more than lava that's cooled and turned to rock as it's swirled above the volcanic skylight. Don't get this geological feature mixed up with a volcano, though. There's no danger that it's ever going to erupt. This is a lava tube. They're reasonably common beneath the Earth's surface but only appear above the ground after a sinkhole, avalanche, or another incident that robs them of their natural covering. There are even a few subterranean tunnels running close to this one if you're brave enough to go and take a look. Here's a more recent mystery that we never got to grips with and still don't have any answers for. What was the strange metal monolith that was found in the deserts of Utah, USA in November 2020? It made news headlines all over the world and was followed by copycat monuments appearing in places as far afield as Romania. But we never got to the bottom of where this one came from. Based on images taken from Google Earth, it appears to have been in situ for several years before it was eventually found by accident by wildlife resource officers. Just as quickly as it was found, the monument disappeared overnight and hasn't been seen since. There's been speculation that it was a leftover prop from a movie, but no movie crew has claimed it as their own. There was also a suggestion that it might have been a work of art by a local sculptor, but there was no signature on the piece to confirm that as being the case. We know that a lot has happened since November 2020, but if anyone out there has any information, we'd still love to know what the deal with this was. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon!